And here's the mouse if you want to zoom in.
Right. Are we all met? Okay.
We are.
So I will.
I hear Alex is back.
Uh, I'm doing a translation of a drama in Livonia, and it's in sort of a hobby basis at present. I got started on it because the publications committee was talking about what books to think about promoting or sponsoring, and it came up because the only English translation that I know of, and I think it may be the only English translation in existence, was the one by I.O. Evans as part of the Fitzroy series in 1967, and it's out of print. I think you might be able to get a copy of it from ABE Books and places like that for $30, $40, $50, whatever. I've never read it. I'm reading it for the first time as I'm working my way through it. I am, according to my spreadsheet, 53% of the way through the book at this point. I thought I was going to have it finished by now, but life intervened. And I say hobby, and speaking to this august group, I have to say I am somewhat intimidated by the fact that I'm undertaking this project. My French is terrible. I will tell you what I can do. I cannot pick up a book by Jules Verne and read it for pleasure. I can't read a page of French from scratch. What I can do is if I have an English text as a crib, I can work my way back and forth between the English and French until I understand the French, and then I can go back to the English. So I did Journey to the Center of the Earth. I took Jesse Campbell's translation of Journey to the Center of the Earth and revised it. Basically, that's what I did. I would take her translation, go to the French, work back and forth, and then revise her translation. With Dr. Ox and other stories, which just has come out as an audiobook now. It's supposed to come out as a printed text. I have to talk to Bear Manor Media about that because I haven't heard anything about that. Similar thing, that was a translation, another Victorian translation by George Toll, and it was a similar kind of process. And I'm doing the same thing here. And this is where I'm going to say the dirty word AI, because in this case there was no English translation that I had access to. So I sent the French text off to DeepL, which is a translation service. They sent back an English text. So that is my starting point. If you are not familiar with the story, A Drama in Livonia is a murder mystery. It's a really good book, I think. It's a really well-constructed book, very interesting, terrific characters, and a very complex background. This is where it takes place, and this is one of the things I love about Jules Verne. Every book by Jules Verne is like a window opening onto a world that I know nothing about. The Baltic provinces, the Baltic states, this is how they are now: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. At the time of the story, if I hit the right button here, this is essentially what they were at the time, although this is actually earlier. This is from when they were controlling Sweden. What happened was Germany was over here, Russia was over here. We had the indigenous Estonians and Latvians. Germany came in the Middle Ages with the crusading knights to defend the German missionaries, and basically stayed. And it was a situation somewhat, I guess, like South Africa, in the sense that you had the German elites in control of the country, and then the indigenous people sort of at the bottom of the social structure. And ultimately you had Estonia making a much smaller area of land than it has now. Livonia, which took up the southern part of what Estonia is now was part of Livonia, and the northwestern part of Latvia was also part of Livonia. And then this other part of Latvia was something called, it's called Latgalia here, but it was also known as Polish Livonia. And then you had the state of Courland, which doesn't really play a part in the story at all. What happened was, in the 17th century, the area was taken over by Sweden. In the 18th century, it was taken over by Peter the Great in Russia. But through all of that, the German elite still remained in control of the local government, the financial system, the education system. Even with Russia in control of everything in the 19th century at the time of the story, German was still the language of instruction at the University of Dorpat. It's the largest, one of the most prestigious universities in the area. So there's a lot of ethnic conflict going on, political conflict between the Russians, the Germans, and the Latvians in particular in the story. And in that context, this murder occurs. A bank clerk who is taking 150,000 rubles and banknotes from one place to another by coach turns up dead one morning and the money's gone. And who took it? Verne, I think, makes a little bit of a mistake in that he seems to consider the Latvians to be Slavic people speaking a Slavic language. I think that they do not consider themselves to be in that category. They were allied, and so he sees them as natural allies of the Russians who are in control of the government. Let me back up a second. As I said, the German elites are still in control, even though Russia has overall administrative control of the territory. Tsar Alexander has undertaken a program of Russification, so he's trying to push the Germans out. And Verne sees the Russians, the Baltic Russians, as allies of the Latvians and against the Baltic Germans. Really, I think what was going on is you had these two elite groups at the top, and the Latvians and Estonians were still at the bottom, peasant farmers and laborers. But the Latvians were allies of the Baltic Russians because they saw them as their best chance to push the Germans out. And as soon as the Germans were gone, then they turned their guns on the Russians also. Certainly by the time of World War I, that was the case. Anyway, that was the background there. And this was it. This is all open to correction. This is all completely new to me. And so I can't say that I am an absolute master of all of this knowledge. But as I said, the text that I was starting with in doing the translation was something that I got from the DeepL service. And the process that I am going through, chapter by chapter, going through paragraph by paragraph, starting off, I've got the French text on one side of the screen and the English text on the other side of the screen. Read a paragraph in this generated text, go to the French, piece my way through the French text, look up words and phrases that I don't understand until I think I understand it, go back to the English text and say, how would I say this, and say it. This gets also to the, as I said, what kind of translation is this? I'll get into it in a minute. Definitely an amateur translation. One example of that is talking about differences in styles within the text. There is one chapter that is made up almost entirely of conversation between students at the University of Dorpat. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, okay, a bunch of male students hanging up in something that ends up being a riot. I know how a bunch of male students in college talk. So I'm going to try to make them talk like that within the limits of decency. I don't know what Jules Verne did in French to make them sound like college students talking in French. How their dialogue is different from the dialogue of the police officers who are also characters in the novel. How do they talk differently? Because I'm working on it on a word by word, phrase by phrase. I don't really have the appreciation of the stylistic differences across passages that what I would say a real translator would have, somebody who has a much deeper experience with this. So AI comes into the process in a couple of places. One is with the initial English text that I'm working with. And sometimes in looking things up, even the literal meaning still doesn't make sense. So a few times I have turned to Claude, which is the AI service that I have a subscription to, and said, do you have any information about what does this idiom mean? And a couple of times it's said things that made sense, and then I've been able to verify in other ways.
Yeah, occasionally you submit questions to the forum to get people.
And that also.
That
also. Yeah, there was one thing, one problem that I came up with. There was a word that showed up in the middle of one of the passages where somebody was supposed to bring something back from a police station, and the word that was in the French was regat, R-E-G-A-T. Couldn't figure out what regat meant. What is this regat that he's supposed to bring back? And I looked it up in the Collins online French dictionary, and no such word. I looked it up in the Russian dictionary, no such word in the Russian dictionary. Put the thing on the Jules Verne forum in Google groups, and Ariel Rodriguez, I believe it was, pointed out that Verne's manuscript for the novel is online at the Gallica website, and pointed to the link to the page for that passage, and the word was actually recu, R-E-C-U, the C with the cedilla. And I looked, and that's actually the fact. And the C with the cedilla in Verne's handwriting looks very much like a G, like a lowercase g. It's the cedilla sort of comes off the end of the C rather than from the middle of the C. And the U, and it's partly because he wrote in pencil and wrote over it with a pen, looks like it's been scribbled over quite a bit. So then the next thing was, this is another mark of the amateur status. I don't have access to university library. I don't have access to the original Etzel publications. The French text that I'm working with was downloaded from the Gilead website. Is this a typo that showed up there, or is this a typo that came about from the original? And it was Volker Dace, I believe, that had the original, and he looked it up and said, yeah, it's right there in the very first edition. So this was a typesetter who wasn't able to read Verne's handwriting and put in regat. So mystery solved, he's supposed to go to the police station and bring back a receipt. So that was fun. Okay. This is one of the fun things about AI, and one of the difficulties of using AI. This is the French at the top, and this was what I got back from one of the AI services when I tried to, and this is one reason why I'm not using this AI service. This has to do with, the novel opens with a Russian fugitive from Siberia who's fleeing across Livonia and trying to get to a seaport where he can escape. And he's hiding in a windmill. And this is a passage about it. There was still the possibility that the aircraft would start moving as soon as the daylight began if the breeze got stronger. In this case, it would have been difficult to maintain the hub in a state of gyration. And moreover, the miller, while he had come to dismember his canvases and maneuver the outer lever, would have seen this man finished at the crossing of the wings. Okay, what the hell is he talking about there? And it actually turns out that instead of further investigation proved that instead of the aircraft starting, he was talking about the windmills starting up again. And breeze got stronger. It said it would have been difficult to maintain the hub in a state of gyration. Well, what happened was the fugitive the night before had been trying to escape from wolves, and he climbed up the windmill and he was perched on the hub between the sails of the windmill. And yeah, it would be difficult for him to keep sitting there once the windmill started turning again. The miller had not come to dismember his canvases. The windmill had canvas sails, and this was something I didn't know. With canvas sails, it was sometimes the process to take in the sails at night and then take them back out in the morning when the windmill started up again. And there was also a chain or a lever that engaged or disengaged the brake wheel that stopped the wind shaft of the windmill from turning. So that's actually what was going on in this passage. And I was able to translate it accordingly. So
what up in the French up there made AI think it was an aircraft? That's what's confusing to me.
That's where I left it here, and this was. This is the dismember. What I thought was the dismember the 12, but this is actually, it turns out to be a nautical term having to do with furling the sail, unfurling the sails, reefing the sails. Yeah. So as yet, this is the fun part of anything having to do with Jules Verne is.
Or both the windmill and the aircraft are both airfoils. They're both that same shape that catches the wind in a certain way to provide lift from your engineer. So
Yeah. And appareil is one of Verne's favorite words for technology because it's so multi-purpose. It can be a windmill. He uses it for the Nautilus and the Albatross. I think even the Victoria, the balloon Victoria. And in one of the recent NAJVS magazines, we had a translation of an old article by a poet who was talking about how wonderful Verne's use of that word appareil is. So clearly, Reverso has a lot to learn about.
Yeah. One of the other AI translations that I got back to this is translated it as device. I don't remember, I don't have the passage at hand right now. I think I just said the windmill.
Because the Wright brothers were doing their thing at about the time that Verne was writing this novel.
Yeah. Now, there is in the world there are AI-generated translations of Jules Verne that are being dumped on the market, unfortunately. Unedited, uncorrected, unexplored, unexamined. And I just wanted to, in self-defense, point out that isn't what this is. This is Microsoft Word, the document with change tracking turned on. The original text is in black. The text that I added or changed is in blue. The text that I deleted is in red. So there are very few paragraphs that haven't been extensively edited or corrected in some way.
On the underlying AI version you started with.
What's that?
So these are the corrections to the AI version you started with?
Correction, yeah, the parts that are in black are what remains of the original AI text.
Not much.
So, yeah, it's not much. You know, in terms of what kind of translation it is, and this is my last point, I'm coming to this from the world of narrating audiobooks. I mean, that's what I do. I worked as a computer programmer for 37 years, and when I was retired and bored, somehow, by Jules Verne, I narrated the Wesleyan Press edition of Mysterious Island. That was 26 hours, my very first audiobook. And I wish I could do it over again now. I want to go back and do all of my first audiobooks over again, but I understand that's not necessarily an uncommon feeling.
Taylor Swift.
What's that?
Taylor Swift.
Oh, did she do that? Oh, really? Oh, okay. No, I am actually thinking seriously about doing Journey to the Center of the Earth over again, because that was an independent project, so I own that, and I can do that. And
the way that you did it?
because I've gotten better. And I've gotten better, and I have better equipment now, so the sound is better.
The first time you did it naturally as you felt it, right? Now you're saying, I'm better, I like to redo it. How would you change what you did?
Well, I think in Journey to the Center of the Earth, I think Liedenbrock's voice is cartoonish.
So with your characterizations then?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, the characterizations, I think I overdid it. Yeah. But I'm coming to it from that standpoint, and so I have very strong feelings. So to me, I'm not so much doing a translation as I am creating the script for an audiobook. That's sort of my mentality. One of the things that is that implies is there are certain parts, because even though this is the people in the publications committee who've seen some of this early work, no, it's footnoted all to heck. I mean, I've always known that I never met a footnote that I didn't want to read, and I now realize I never met a footnote that I didn't want to write. Sometimes the footnotes take up half the page. Every time I come across something that I don't know anything about, I go and I look it up, and I write, one of the things I have to tell you about, this was another AI thing. One of the characters is exploring, walking down the streets of Riga and describing what he sees, and one of them is the town hall of Riga. And the notable thing about the town hall of Riga, he says, is it has a tall bell tower with big balls. And I read that and I said, no, but what on earth is he talking about? So I started looking for pictures, 19th century drawings or photographs of the town hall. And one of the things I found out is the town hall of Riga actually wasn't that remarkable, but what was remarkable about the town hall square in Riga was very close to it was the church. I think it was St. Peter's, I actually don't remember at the moment. The church had a spire that was 400 feet tall. It was a tourist attraction. It was one of the major things that everybody remembered about Riga, and everybody drew pictures of it, took photographs of, and was bombed by the Nazis in World War II and then rebuilt. The spire was 400 feet tall and had basically a stack of large copper spheres with a weather vane at top. And that had to be what Jules Verne was talking about. And so I added a little bit of text for the translation. It's not big balls, it's large copper spheres with a weather vane on top. Rick Walther does some of this in his anthology, Amazing Journeys. A classic example is in the very first chapter of Journey to the Center of the Earth, Axel introduces his uncle, Professor Liedenbrock, a professor at the Johanneum. And that's basically all it says in the French. In his translation, he says, a professor at the Johanneum, comma, Hamburg's remarkable or notable, renowned prep school, period. That's the kind of thing in most translations would be information that would be relegated to a footnote. But he says in his introduction to the volume that he's doing that kind of thing to cut down on the need for footnotes, to cut down on the interruption to the flow of the story. In an audiobook, that's even more necessary because people listening to an audiobook don't have access to the footnotes. So I've done that here and there in the translation. One of the things in particular was the structure and operation of the windmill, the particular type of windmill that's being discussed in the passage. Verne talks about it, but he leaves just enough information out that when I read it, it was very confusing. So I had to go back and do some research about that particular kind of windmill. The fact that the sails were attached to a wind shaft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact that the roof rotated. He mentions that, but he doesn't mention the fact that it's rotated by means of something called the tail pole that hangs down the back to the ground and can be pushed by people to push. Anyway, this is all leading up to, I was going to read a passage just to give you a taste, and then for entertainment purposes. This has to do with the fugitive who is escaping from Siberia and has spent the night in the windmill. I usually do this behind a microphone, and my mouth isn't usually this dry, but we'll give it a try here. It was hard to accept, but worse dangers faced him now at the end of his adventurous journey. He'd been reported. The police were sweeping the countryside and coordinating their efforts with the border guards to track him down. So where should he go? Reval? No. Better to head for Pernau. Like the miller said, it was closer. The temperature was rising. The ice would start breaking up soon, whether it was in the Gulf of Finland or the Gulf of Riga. He'd made his decision. Now he needed to leave the mill as soon as it was dark enough to make his flight possible. But how could he do it without alerting the miller? The breeze was blowing and the mill was humming steadily along. The miller would soon be settling in. Going down the stairs and leaving through one of the doors on the ground floor was no longer possible. Could he crawl back through the skylight, climb over to the tail pole, and use it to slide down to the ground? A skilled and vigorous man like him ought to be able to manage it. Yes, there was danger. The wind shaft, the one to which the sails of the windmill were attached, was spinning fast, and he could be caught and crushed by the gear teeth. But it was a risk worth taking. It would be another hour before it was dark enough. If the miller had some reason to come up to the attic before then, could the fugitive hope to avoid being seen? Not if it was still light, and to tell the truth, not even if it was dark, because the miller would surely have a lantern with him. What then? Well, if the miller came up to the attic and found him, the fugitive would throw himself on top of him, overpower him, and gag him. If the miller resisted, if he tried to defend himself, if his cries woke up the village, well, too bad for him. The fugitive had a knife, and the miller's throat would have to be cut. He hadn't come this far through so many dangers to shy away from what had to be done now. But he hoped to avoid that extremity. Spilling someone's blood was a high price to pay for his freedom. Besides, was there any reason the miller would enter the attic? Didn't he have to keep watch over the millstone that was turning at top speed under the force of the windmill's sails? An hour passed. The wind shaft made a tick-tacking noise as it turned. The gears creaked, the breeze whistled, the millstone groaned as it crushed the grain. The twilight, always prolonged in these high latitudes, faded into shadow. The attic was completely dark. It was almost time for him to go. The night's journey would be exhausting. He had to cover no less than 40 versts, and he had to leave as soon as possible. He made sure the knife in his belt moved easily in its sheath. He loaded 6 cartridges into his revolver to replace the ones he'd fired at the wolves. There was still the problem, a considerable one, of getting through the skylight without being caught by the rotating wind shaft. The end rested in a frame that was flush against the skylight itself. Once it got past this point, the projections of the roof would make it possible to reach the tail pole without too much difficulty. The fugitive was crawling toward the skylight when a noise, quite audible amid the grinding of the millstone and the gears, was heard. It was the sound of heavy footsteps echoing on the stairs. The miller was climbing up to the attic, a lantern in his hand. He appeared just as the fugitive, crouched down with his revolver in his hand, was about to fall on him. The miller was visible from the waist up in the stairwell, and he said, "It's time to go, my friend. Don't wait any longer. Come on down. The door is open." Stunned, the fugitive was unable to speak. So the brave miller knew he was there all the time. Had he seen him take refuge in the mill? What must have happened was this. While the fugitive was asleep, the miller had come up to the attic and found him there, and he decided to let him go on sleeping. After all, he was a fellow Russian, wasn't he? Slavs can recognize each other by their facial features. The miller realized the police were hunting the man. Did it matter why? It was a question that never occurred to him, just as it would never have occurred to him to hand him over to Sergeant Eck. "Come on down," he said softly. His heart pounding with emotion, the fugitive climbed down the steps to the ground floor where one of the doors was open. "Here's some food," said the miller, stuffing bread and meat into the fugitive's knapsack. "I saw your sack was empty, and your flask is too. Fill it up, then go. If the police find out..." "Keeping an eye out for them is your job, isn't it? Don't worry about me. I don't care who you are. The one thing I do know is this. You're a Slav, and no Slav turns another Slav over to the German police." "Thank you, thank you," cried the fugitive. "Get moving, my friend. May God guide you and forgive you, if you have anything to be forgiven for." The night was pitch dark. The road that ran along the foot of the mound was completely deserted. The fugitive gave the miller a final wave goodbye and disappeared. One thing I will say, if this goes anywhere other than my study, if it were to go anywhere else, somebody who is fluent in French and has credentials as a Verne scholar needs to review it. That's all I'll say.